Hi, everyone. My name is Jean, otherwise known as Jean B., food addict, formerly of Massachusetts, now living in sometimes sunny Florida in retirement, where I have lots more time to do program. And I want to talk a bit about sponsorship. One of the things I first heard when I learned about OA, which was 21 years ago in July of 2004, back in the days when there were face-to-face meetings, and I lived in Massachusetts in the Boston area, and there was a lot of 90-day OA in that area. And the person who told me about OA was a neighbor, and she told me that, there were meetings coming up that weekend that we could go to, and that what I needed to do was have some money ready to buy books and pamphlets, which I thought, well, that was wonderful. That I should go out and get a digital food scale so I can weigh and measure my food. I would need to stop eating things like sugar and flour and caffeinated beverages and other such things. And I said, okay, I thought I could do that. And I was going to have to get a sponsor to help me guide me through the program. And, I asked her about that and I said, well, what about you? And she said, well, no, we're friends. It's better to get somebody who's not, like a close friend who can be more objective. And I said, okay. And she said, you'll go to, there's a Saturday morning meeting and a Sunday morning meeting, and you'll meet a lot of people and you can, people will say that they're available to sponsor, and you'll get somebody who's a sponsor for you. And if you want, that can be like a temporary sponsor until you get, somebody that you have a better idea about. And I said, okay. And Saturday morning came and off we went. And I walked into a room at the Lawrence Memorial Hospital in Medford. It was a conference room on the first floor. And there was a big table and all these people sitting around, and they all looked like, pretty much normal weight people. And I'm like, okay, you know, because I was not that familiar with diet programs, but I knew that most people, went to a diet program and then they stopped once they lost the weight, right? And I was told no, that here in OA, people stuck around and that's how they're able to sponsor other people and they reinforce the message. And I said, okay. And so I listened, I got some literature, and I got a temporary sponsor who gave me a copy of the meeting. That particular meeting had a printed list of their members' first names and phone numbers, and gave me a copy of that list and said, okay, I want you to call 3 people every day. And I said, how can I call them? I don't know them. And she said, that's okay. Tell them you're a newcomer. They'll be nice to you. And they were. So going forward, I had my temporary sponsor. Unfortunately, I had some change in my hours and I was no longer able to have that person as my sponsor anymore because the time that she wanted me to call was time that I was at work and I wasn't able to do that. But I was able to, she gave me a clue. She said, why don't you call so-and-so? She knows a lot of sponsors. I said, okay. And I called that person. And well, I happen to have been a vegetarian in those days. I'm a vegan now. And that person was able to connect me with the one vegetarian sponsor in OA 90 in the Boston area. And that sponsor took me through my first year in program, through my weight loss, because when I came in, I was somewhere in the vicinity of 250 pounds. And a year later, I was down to more like 120. And I've been somewhere in that range, like 120, 110. Now I'm a little below that ever since. And after I had been in program for a time, I liked the idea of doing service and waiting 90 days to do service. I mean, obviously there were things I could do before I had my 90 days, like help set up chairs or help the literature person take things out or put things away or things like that. But um, once I got my 90 days, I was all into doing service, whether it was finding speakers or helping get people to do different things on the meeting, so on and so forth, treasurer, whatever. And um, and after I had been in program for, I'd say maybe about a year and a half, 2 years, my then sponsor said to me, "Okay, I think you're ready to sponsor." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, really." I said, "Okay." My first attempts at sponsorship were frankly unmitigated disasters. Um, there was one lady who wanted me to come to her place and help get rid of all the junk food in her house. When I got there and talked to her about it, she said, well, no, she really didn't think she should do that because she had grandkids, and what if her grandkids came over and so forth. So I said, all right, this obviously is not going to work. So forget that one. A couple other people, they just said, yeah, okay. And then a day or two later, I found somebody else. Okay, that's fine. People can do that. But I have since had some folks who have stayed with me for a while. And I've gone through a number of sponsors, and now I've had one sponsor for many years. But one of the ways that I sponsor people is one of the first things I do when I talk to them, especially since we're no longer, face to face, is I talk to them about what they're looking for. What are they trying to do? What their medical conditions are. So, for instance, like, do they have any allergies? Do they have any digestive problems? Are they on medications for one thing or another? Because I don't want to recommend something to someone and then find out, say, like that they're allergic to it, because that's not a good idea. And so then, armed with that information, I can go over food plan with them. Some people come in and talk to me, and they already have a food plan that they had from a previous sponsor or that they got from a dietitian or from their doctor. And that's fine. I talk to them about it. I look it over. I make some notes. And, I say, okay, this is something I can work with. Uh, I'll just make some notes here about what exactly it is that you do. So then when you send me or call in your food or text it or whatever you're going to do to let me know about your food, that I know that you're doing what we agreed on. And that works. That works very nicely. I will also say that people have told me that I'm a very gentle sponsor. There are some people I know who are really, really strict. And if they tell you to call them at 6 a.m. and you call at 6:01, they'll blast you because you're a minute late. And I don't do that because I know, yes, I am setting aside time for them. And yes, I feel my time is valuable. But on the other hand, I don't want to put somebody in a position where they feel that, that they're going to call me and I'm going to tear their head off, because I'm not going to do that. I may talk to them, particularly if they're like more than a minute or two late. I might say to them, well, you said you were going to call at such and such a time. We may want to tighten that up a little, something like that. But, I also have people who have situations where, maybe you had a doctor's appointment and you got and you were delayed and you didn't get home in time, or you're stuck in traffic, or your boss asked you to stay late at work or something like that, then yeah, if you can, just let me know. And, I'm generally cool with it. If it's something where It's like, well, okay, I really can't talk to you at this particular time that you're available because I have a meeting or I have a doctor's appointment or I have something else going on that makes it, impossible for me to talk to you. Then we'll work out something else. And I'm also not somebody who's going to tell someone, gee, I want you to wake up at the crack of dawn to call me because I don't feel that that's necessary. I know some people feel that, yeah, they absolutely want to talk to you before you have breakfast, that there are things that, we all have. And I know for myself, for instance, like where I'm living now, I have a mother who's 96 years old and needs some help. So typically my mornings are set up so that I get up, have my breakfast, take care of my dog, and then we go over to my mother's and I help her for a while. So, if somebody says to me, can I call you at 7 a.m.? The answer is probably going to be no. I'm not going to be available then. But, so I mean, I can take calls in the daytime. I can take calls in the evening, whatever it happens to be. I'm not that strict. What I do in sponsoring is I try to meet people at least halfway. And where I can, my idea of being a sponsor is I'm not responsible for you being abstinent. I provide guidance. I can teach you what I know, what I've experienced. I can share with you. If you choose to do that, that's fine. I don't require, I mean, I happen to be vegan. I have no problem sponsoring people who are carnivores. It doesn't bother me. If somebody says, yeah, I want to eat, meat or fish or something like that for my protein, that's fine. It's not what I do, but I'm not saying that you have to do what I do. Years ago, they used to say, follow the food plan that your sponsor had. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, at one point, I had a sponsor who had never sponsored a vegetarian before. And she told me she wanted me to go check with with a nutritionist. And I said, that's fine. I talked to my doctor who referred me to nutritionist attached to, local hospital. And I went in there with a copy of my food plan and a bag with all my vitamins and supplements. And I showed my food plan to the nutritionist and she said, why on earth are you here? You're doing everything I want I want my clients to do. You know, you've got, you've got low fat protein, you have whole grains, you're not eating sugar and flour, and you're not doing caffeine, and you're not eating between meals, and everything's weighed and measured. She said, this is wonderful. She said, can I make a copy of this? And I said, sure. And so she made a copy of my food plan so that she could share it with other people. I thought that was wonderful. Then we went over my vitamins and supplements, and that was very helpful. And I've used, that plan or variations thereof ever since. But, for me, sponsoring is a responsibility. It's a way to help people. But as I say, I'm not responsible for that person staying abstinent. That's up to them. But I can provide guidance. I can answer questions. And if somebody asks me a question that I don't know, I can ask my sponsor. And if she doesn't know, she can ask her sponsor. And it goes up the chain that way and then back down again. And nobody except my sponsor knows that I was the one that asked the question. And I'm the only one who knows which sponsee it was that asked the question. And that's fine. But so, I mean, I enjoy being a sponsor. I have a number of sponsees now. I probably could make room for another if need be. But, but I find that it's very helpful. And by talking to other people, I learn things from them as well, just as they learn things from me. So with that, I will pass and thank you for inviting me to share today.